time are Deputies Pringle and Healy. 5 minutes each, I presume. Deputy Pringle.
Thank you, Ciarán. Yeah, sharing time with Deputy Healy. Minister, the EU-Turkey deal agreement recently on migration is unprecedented. There are no other agreements similar to this. It is a play and a manipulation of existing agreements, both bilateral between the EU and Turkey and within the EU itself. The EU states that people who do not have a right to international protection will be immediately returned to Turkey. The legal framework for these returns is a bilateral readmission agreement between Greece and Turkey. And from the 1st of June, this will be succeeded by the EU-Turkey readmission agreement, following the entry into force of the provisions on readmission of third country nationals of this agreement. There are huge legal ambiguities here, but even more disconcerting are the severe human rights issues that could be at play. How can they decide so quickly that somebody isn't entitled to international protection and actually return them back to Turkey again? We've seen in Ireland how long it takes to decide on the situation in relation to asylum seekers. I would like to reiterate the view of the Migrant Council of Ireland and the Irish Refugee Council and other organisations that a humanitarian crisis needs a humanitarian response, with the needs of men, women and children central to any development. And this is clearly not the case in the EU-Turkey deal recently agreed. There is supposedly an understanding that no decisions will be taken without being compliant with international and European law. How do we actually know that? We don't. We're relying on Turkey and Greece to actually satisfy that for us. The other question is how will part of the $3 billion dedicated to oversight in Turkey prevent potential mass deportations of people entering either Turkey or Greece? And how will the safety of these people be ensured regardless of the outcome of their application for asylum? There's huge problems here. The agreement asserts that if you've tried to get into the EU illegally, you'll be at the back of the line in terms of a legal resettlement process. On the ground, this translates to anyone entering Greece or Turkey from now on will automatically be sent back to Turkey because all of a sudden Turkey is now a safe third country, despite its dismal human rights record. And we only have to look recently at how Turkey is treating their own Kurdish population in relation to that. Turkey only provides temporary protection to Syrians, which falls far short of full refugee status. Human rights groups have expressed Turkey's sudden transition into a safe third country as ludicrous and highly improbable, meaning the EU will overlook a certain amount of human rights abuses in order to push ahead with this deal. Even under the most generous interpretation of the rules, only Syrian asylum seekers who currently make up half of those arriving in Greece could be returned to Turkey. And if we look at our own situation, we still only have put in place procedures to accept 5% of the agreed 4,000 refugees. That's only 200 people. And indeed, I think it was only 10 people have actually accepted to be relocated to Ireland. So shouldn't we address our own lack of engagement in this humanitarian crisis before we support others and before we support changes in EU rules and EU procedures that will have such a huge impact on this humanitarian crisis? The undignified attempt to swap one refugee for another is in itself an affront to the notion of human rights, dignity and respect to vulnerable people. 2,000 people are still attempting to reach Greece from Turkey every day despite the agreement last week. This agreement will only result in refugees taking even greater risks to trek across more treacherous ground or seas to enter Europe. This deal brings greater risk to already extremely vulnerable people and is again an affront to human rights. Today I call on the caretaker Taoiseach to respond to these humanitarian concerns and express his opposition to this EU deal. With only an acting government in place, there can be no opposition to tie the Taoiseach into such an agreement. Not only are there issues regarding international human rights breaches within the agreement, there are concerns regarding the legality and monitoring capacity of the agreement. Although there is no start date set, the European Union has been quick to implement this agreement in the hopes to avoid a pull factor before the new system takes place. Real questions remain as to how everyone is going to monitor the swapping of Syrian refugees on the ground, and nobody seems able to explain this. The commitment by Turkey to overhaul its own asylum system so that it adheres to the Geneva standards and carry out the safe country status is a non-legally binding one, and there are a lot of questions as to how Greece and Turkey will overhaul these systems overnight. And we know that the EU is prepared to turn a blind eye to this in order to have its own potential wall around the European Union to prevent people coming in here. There are alternative channels for migration and legal pathways, including an important high-level meeting on global responsibility sharing through pathways for admission to Syrian refugees on the 30th of March to be hosted by the UNHCR. This meeting will attempt to address commitments for over 170,000 resettlement and humanitarian admission places for Syrian refugees, with a target for admission of 10% Syrian refugees over the next 3 years. And the EU-Turkey deal attempts to overshadow this and undermine this agreement, which would be international, and that's where the EU should be engaging. Thank you.
Pringle.